Hi, today on Jay's World Kitchen, I'm going to show you how to make my version of a classic cottage pie. Now, depending on where in the world you go, a lot of people refer to this as shepherd's pie. And a shepherd's pie technically is made with lamb. We're making this with beef, which is why it's a cottage pie and not a shepherd's pie. But it is definitely a comfort food and something that I really enjoy eating and making. So let's have a quick look at these ingredients. You're going to need 1 pound of ground beef, 1 medium onion, 4 cloves of garlic, a can of diced tomatoes which are drained and the liquid is reserved, 2 teaspoons of rosemary, I'm using fresh, 1 teaspoon of marjoram, which I'm using dried, a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1½ teaspoons of salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of sugar, some ground black pepper to taste, a cup of frozen vegetables, and grated cheddar. It really is quite simple to throw this together. Now, of course, every recipe that I do, I try and make sure that anyone could do this. Don't have to follow along exactly. Make this your own and add your own sort of flavor profiles to it. But I'm going to just start off with some, very basically I'm using olive oil. You can use any kind of oil that you like. Some people like canola, some people like vegetable, or you could actually use butter for this step as well. We're going to heat that up over a medium heat, and then we're going to toss in our onions and your garlic. And again, I say 4 cloves, but well, you know me, I do like my garlic, so it could be a little bit more than that. And just let those start to cook, and we're going to toss in our chopped fresh rosemary. Our marjoram, and our nutmeg, and at this point I'm actually throwing in a little bit of Liam Perrin's Worcester sauce. Not a ton, but it's just something that I like to have because I do like that sort of depth in there. And now we're going to put in our ground beef. And you may find that you have to add a little bit more oil, that's okay. Now keep in mind as well, I'm using a very lean ground beef. Some people prefer to have like some that's got a little bit more fat in. I prefer ones that don't, because I don't like having to drain it after. And you're basically just going to let all of that brown. And once all your meat is mostly browned, we're going to add in our salt and as much or as little black pepper as you'd like. I would say usually about a 1/2 teaspoon. I wouldn't go much stronger than that unless you particularly like that flavor in there. Now, while everyone's recipe is different for this, I do like to add in frozen vegetables, specifically peas and carrots. It's one of my favorite sort of things to add into any kind of sauce like this, and it also gives you a little bit of extra nutrition as well as some bulk to this. And I'm just using frozen peas and carrots, and I'm using 1 cup. Very straightforward. Stir that in. And now I'm adding in my diced tomatoes. Now I did say that I had strained this, so I'd taken out most of the excess liquid because you may find that you don't want this to be too runny. But you also don't want it to be too dry. And so the reason why you reserve that liquid is in case you want to add in a little bit of it, just to give it some sauce here. I just love how all those colors mix together. It just looks so great. And we do want it to get quite saucy because we're going to let this simmer until the whole thing comes together into a nice sauce. And the final ingredient we're going to add in is our sugar. That'll sort of help break down some of that acidity in the tomato. And now you're going to let that come to a boil and simmer until most of that liquid has reduced to pretty much just a thick sauce. Now for the potato topping, it's pretty straightforward. You're basically making mashed potatoes. And so you're going to need 4 medium or large potatoes that have been peeled and diced, and in my case already boiled, with some salt. 2 tablespoons of butter, and well, I think you know me by now, you know there's probably a little bit more than that butter in there. Some salt and some pepper to taste, and again, this is really a personal preference. I'm using probably about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt and just a decent grating of pepper in there. Now, traditionally, you can also add in some nutmeg. I really do like the flavor of nutmeg, but that's not the profile we're going for today. And what you want to do is you want to start off by just mashing those down with a potato masher and mixing them together. You don't want this to be too thick, but you also don't want it to be too thin. So we're going to just get that butter well incorporated in there first. And once it is, we'll see if we need some milk. And so it is a little bit dry and starchy, so we're going to add in a splash of milk. And now I'm actually going to be using my hand mixer to get this as smooth as I possibly can. And I just transferred mine into a bowl because it was a bit hard to get my mixer in there. And as we're sort of whipping that up, we're also going to add in an egg. And now we're going to set that aside for just a few minutes. Our sauce is very nicely thickened on the stovetop, and we're now going to take some kind of casserole dish, and I'm doing a relatively small one. What you're going to do here is simply put your beef sauce on the bottom in a nice thick layer. And while you're doing this, you want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And what I've done is I've put my mashed potatoes into a very simple piping bag so that I can pipe it onto the top, but you really don't have to get anywhere near as fancy. You can use a Ziploc bag with the corner cut off if you really want to. And I'm just going to make little loops like this all the way down my pan. I'm just going to top this with some grated cheddar cheese. Not a ton, you don't have to use this if you don't want to. Some people at this point would just put nutmeg across the top and leave it be. And now we're going to pop that in the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes, just until the top is nicely browned, and take it out and enjoy. And once it's come out the oven, that beautiful cheesy top is just looks and smells amazing, and a nice portion is full of creamy potatoes and just a really good looking meat. I've been dying to try this because it's one of my favorite recipes, and it just smells so good every time. Oh, and that doesn't disappoint at all. It is flavorful and just melts away in your mouth. That is really an amazing dish, and you really do have to try this, and remember to make it your own. You can adjust these flavor profiles to what suits you the most. And if you do, I'd love to hear what your variations are in the comment section below. Remember too that if you enjoyed this video, to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and remember to turn on notifications so that you know when my next video drops. Remember too that you can find me on all my social media using my Linktree link down below in the comment section. And until next time, Happy eating!